What's going on out there, boys and girls? Thanks for checking out the video. This one's going to be a little bit differently formatted than other ones that I've made. While I am going to talk about the gear, the skills, the Vampiric Powers, Paragon, like everything else, and show you gameplay, this one's going to be a bit more long form. It's going to be a longer video. I'm going to tell you about all the choices I'm making, why I like certain defensive aspects, why certain boards are good for what the build is that we're getting into for Abattoir of Zir. There's not one, but two, but three. There's three Paragon boards in here we're going to discuss. The reason is, we'll just kind of talk about that briefly. You need the first board, the first Paragon board for your character to clear Abattoir of Zir level 1, thus obtaining the Tears of Blood glyph, correct? That's what this build's going to show you. That's ground zero. The next board that I show you is you now have the Tears of Blood inserted in a whole new Paragon board structure up until level 1 to level 49 of the glyph. We're at level 50. That's where Paragon board number 3 shows up. You start to make the changes because the radius of Tears of Blood goes from 4 to 5, thus giving you even more player power, and you want to be able to respond to that with at least a roadmap of where to go. So I think the best way to start out this video is to sort of show you the gear that I'm using and I recommend you have, with a couple backup options to give you hopefully the best ammunition for today, tomorrow, and then Tuesday when the Abattoir Zir launches, whenever that happens. So let's get into the gearing section right now. And first of all, we're gonna talk about stats. So I have an evaluation of my damage here. It's assuming it's 19,400 attack power. That's fine. I don't really look at this. It's not very meaningful to me. One thing that is meaningful, though, is this armor value. So with the current build that we have, we're at 10,882 armor, which I think is okay. When you start hitting a target here, right, and you're in combat, assuming you're hitting all things, life is good, right? You're constantly hitting. You're going to achieve 14,801 armor. Now, we've all been hearing to try and get 15,000. Like, you hear everybody else talking about 15,000 armor. That might be what we need, but we did discover recently from the AOZ video on the November 30th campfire chat that the monster level isn't actually as high as we thought it may go to. So 15,000 may not be the number we need to hit. So I'm going to be comfortable with that number just to clear AOZ level 1. And I think we're going to get there comfortably. Based on what we saw, that video, it appears that that difficulty of Abattoir of Zir Bloodforge Dungeon 1 will be like running a players 2 to 3 Nightmare 100 dungeon, which this class can carry players 4 on, no problem. So I'm comfortable with that, okay? I think the armor value, with all the decisions made, is going to be adequate. Now, we have a 31,406 HP pool for life, and we can augment both of those values, by the way, armor or life, because we have flask options. So just quickly, I'm going to go over to my stash here. Now, let's see which tab it is right here. So if we decide that we want to use things like maybe even Lucky Hit to get more Lucky Hit, we can do that. If we want to use HP to get 5% more, we could do that too. If we want to get armor value, like 900 more armor because we find out that we need it, we have some player agency here. And I'd recommend you try to get some Iron Skin Elixirs before December 5th. Try to pick up some Elixirs of Fortitude and try to get Elixirs of Combat Fortune just to have some options. These are the three that I'm going to go with. I am going to recommend Incense really quick as well. Song of the Mountain to get more armor, I think is pretty good. You can go with Red Amine Buzz, which is going to give you 500 life. And then you're going to have, there's only one tier 3. I think it's Chorus of War. So Chorus of War is the third one. And you can have all 3 levels of Incense together at the same time. I recommend you do that. The reason I'm recommending you kind of go over and above, Abattoir of Zir's got this really cool mechanic in that if you die once or anybody in your party dies in there, it's over. It's game over. So we're building this to be more defensive out the gate with offensive options if we need it, okay? It's a modular rogue build on purpose. This build has choices. So let's go over the gear. Helmet slot, obviously Harlequin Crest Shaco, and to nobody's surprise, we're going to use rubies on everything. We're not using damage reduction sapphires. We're not reducing damage over time because we don't know that we need that yet. And I'd like to have rubies in my gear because it's going to coincide with the Doombringer if you have it, as Doombringer gives you an additional 41.4% maximum life. But from the top, Harlequin Crest. +4 to all skills is amazing. It's going to give you all stats, which helps in the Paragon board, helps give you more damage, armor, like everything. Resistance. It's the Chef's Kiss helmet, and I love it. It's one I recommend. But the Shaco on this build actually does something very, very good for you. If you press S to open your flyout menu, without any points invested, this modular rogue build, or anybody that's using the Shaco, can quickly say, okay, I don't need dash. I could toss on Dark Shroud if I want to do that. I could toss on concealment if I think I need it. And I'm quickly swapping in all these skills without ever having to choose them from my skill tree. That's a very powerful effect at level 4 for free. So Shaco, obvious choice. Let's take a look at the armor. I'm using Disobedience Legendary Aspect. I think it is the best defensive aspect in the game for every character, rogue included. So if you can get total armor, damage reduction from distance, so you don't get one shot from corpse bows or irritating faraway targets in the AOZ. That's gonna be important. And then damage reduction from poisoned enemies. And everything should be poisoned because we're gonna be using pestilent points, bursting venoms in this build, and you're gonna see that as we go through. So you're getting a massive damage reduction, period. You're also getting damage reduction from things that you engage with, which is fine. And then total armor, just to assist with that value. So we hit the cap. So we have 85% damage reduction at all times. We want to have 85% physical damage mitigated, so we're only incurring 15% damage. Looking at the legs, total armor, maximum life, damage reduction, and damage reduction again from poison enemies. Now, that roll's not perfect, but my God, is it expensive. Like, it gets expensive to roll these really well-rolled items, and that's okay. So this is what it is. I think if you can go for those affixes, you're going to be okay. And again, you could change it. You don't need to go with like damage reduction from poison. You could try damage reduction from distant as well. That's also fine. It's also a suitable option. Now let's talk about the pants slot for just a moment. In previous builds that I've mentioned, you see that I don't use Tibaults, and you know that I'm using Condemnation. So the plan for me going in is I'm taking a defensive posture with my gear. I want to make sure that I'm defensive when I'm navigating into combat, and then if there's something that has a high HP pool, it's very simple. I can just open up my inventory by pressing I, and I right-click my pants. And that's all that I do. And now I've equipped Tibaults, which will then turn on the Tibault's Condemnation bug, exploit, or feature, however you want to call it, right? You now have that. And let me explain how that works. The pants that has maximum resource here on Tibaults, only Tibaults, if you can get maximum resource, your combo point value changes. So you'll see I have 21 combo points, but if I put on my regular defensive pants, my everyday pants, I only have 3. And the game is designed to allow me to have 3 combo points. So as long as you've got Condemnation and you have Tibaults, bang, turn it on, you can get up to 21 combo points. And that scales up to do tremendous damage for you. But you're only going to use that when you feel like you need it. You're kind of falling behind on time, and you got to risk it for the biscuit to make sure you can proc the boss and actually clear that dungeon floor. Then you're going to like prioritize Tibaults. But out of the gate, to survive and not die and then reset the whole fight, whole level, make sure you're using the defensive position of Might, which is the defensive aspect I recommend you use on pants. Might is awesome in my opinion. It's better than Umbrus in this regard. So I don't even have to hit anything with Might legendary aspect. If I throw it, I have 20% damage reduction for free. I don't have to hit the target. None of that ever has to happen. But if I do, that's great, right? I don't have to hit it with Might, just casting. So I'm pressing shift and left click. And that's how I cast my basic skill, okay? And that's amazing because you control the damage reduction. I really, really enjoy that. And like I just mentioned, whenever you're ready to go, right click and bang. Now you have Tibaults on, and you're flying through with huge damage from the class. Let's look at boots for a second. I prefer max evade charges, and that pays dividends in our Vampiric Power selection. So 3 max charges. On your boots, you're going to see 2. And as you push it up at the blacksmith going a level 925 or whatever, plus 25, that's when it gets the additional max charge, okay? I'm looking for things like movement speed, and I want 2 resistances and dodge chance. And again, I want dodge chance because dodge chance is important in our Paragon board. We'll deal more damage when we dodge attacks. So let's try to increase the damage output by staying in combat and then not getting killed, right? Fantastic choice there. Looking at the two-handed weapon, you want to get all stats, dexterity. Dexterity, again, is our main core stat. It gives us skill damage and dodge. So all stats is also like an extension of dexterity. Damage to close, because we're always in close, and then damage to crowd control enemies. Crowd control is important in our skills later on, because whatever we have for crowd control damage, we get that as a double-dipped advantage in close quarter combat key passive, and I'll show you that when we get to the skill tree, okay? So, again, gems, we're looking at damage over time. We're pushing the poison damage with this build. We're always trying to get as much damage over time as we can on every target until it rots to death and kind of expires, right? Then we navigate on. We know that every floor in the AOZ has about 10 minutes. We have 10, it's 10 minutes to clear that floor or we fail. So getting that damage on targets fast, getting that damage killing them is important, and that's what the Amethyst is going to do for us in our weapon slot. Again, Condemnation is always on our character. We're never getting rid of that. We're not going to. And then Doombringer, if you have access to it, is amazing. While the stat of like damage and core skill and the lucky hit to heal is kind of nice, it's a defensive sword. It also has a lucky hit chance, up to 25% chance on our lucky hit to do a shadow AoE, area of effect attack, and then reduce things damage to us by 20% for 5 seconds. So lucky hit for me is important because I can apply another defensive layer of 20% damage reduction on anything that's near me and got hit by that shadow effect. And that's just powerful. So what do you do if you don't have Doombringer, right? This question comes up all the time. I'd recommend people use Ashar's Kanjar. I like Ashar's a lot. It gives you up to 30% increased rapid attack speed. It gives you more damage to crowd control. It gives you lucky hit that we want. The basic skill damage is nice to have, but the additional movement speed after killing an elite is not a dead affix either, because movement speed actually works towards our Ravenous Vampiric power to give us increased attack speed. The faster we move, the faster we attack. So I like that. Now, if you don't have Doombringer and you don't have Ashar's, you could look at like a basic dagger like this. And I'm going to recommend daggers to you for 2 reasons. One, it attacks faster. A dagger has an attack speed of 1.2 per second. It's very fast, where a sword has 1.1. And the sword gives you critical strike damage, which you're not focused on. But the dagger gives you damage versus close. And we're always hitting things close. So close on dagger, faster attacks, keeps us alive, especially with our Vampiric power Undying as well. So I'd recommend Doombringer number 1. Ashar's Kanjar number 2 if you can get it. And I think that drops off Lord Zir, so start farming that guy with your Exquisite Blood, which is gained from world bosses and Legion events before it's too late. And if you can't get that, look for something like this. Again, I like the rapid aspect on my legendary aspect. It could be accelerating or rapid. I prefer rapid simply because rapid gives you basic increased attack speed. So you're constantly, doesn't matter what it is, attacking 30% faster, which helps a lot with Undying, which just heals you, even if you're not hitting anything. And I can kind of show you that too. So what stats would you look for on a dagger? Dexterity, all stats if you can get it, or Dexterity, damage over time, which is poison, damage to close, and damage to crowd control. Crowd control, again, works with your CQC bonus. I've got some notes here I'm going to review from time to time in this video, so I think those are all pretty good. Let's take a look at the rings. Now, conversation piece number 1. I'm a fan of this ring, especially on content that could be really, really troublesome and like maybe clap us, just hit really, really hard. Writhing Band of Trickery kind of saves the day for us. Anytime we use a defensive skill, in this case, it's going to be Poison Trap. But every time we lay down a Poison Trap, we taunt things for 3 seconds, and then it has a 12-second cooldown. But when we place it, it's down for 3 seconds, and then there's 9-second window of nothing getting taunted, which is okay. The nice part about the Writhing Band of Trickery is you also get damage to crowd control and life, which are 2 things that we actually want anyway. Crowd control for CQC and life for Doombringer to get that life up to 31,406. Pays dividends there huge. Now, the trick that we talked about before with the X-Falls Corroded Signet and the Tibaults on the pants, that Tibault swap, you could do the same thing. I could toss pants on, I could toss on X-Falls Corroded Signet as a single target DPS increase whenever we need it. It's that simple. If you get comfortable with it and you're like kind of attacking a target, right? You just open up your inventory with I, and you right click and you drag it over if you need to. Or you can right click to replace. It's whichever's more comfortable for you. But as you get comfortable with that play pattern of opening your inventory and swapping on a piece of gear, you'll actually do a lot more damage single target because you don't need to be so defensive anymore. It's not like that one thing is really going to kill you, so we don't have to worry about it. And we're not threatened with having to taunt things. We're not threatened with needing the HP. We can then use X-Files Corroded Signet, which drops off Duriel pretty frequently, I would say. Let's have a look at that ring. So it's all stats, which also helps with our resistance. It helps with armor. It helps with damage. It helps with dodge. That's huge. It has damage over time, which is poison. Lucky hit, which we like. And cooldown reduction is nice and all, but we're a combo-based rogue. In our specialization, we're going to choose combo points. We don't care about inner sight. We're not really built for inner sight. We're also not in PvP, so we don't need preparation. We're not really popping a shadow clone to reset all of our unstoppable abilities. So for this build, specialization is going to be combo points because we really want to expose the benefit of Tibault and Condemnation. Okay? So the ring swap is pretty nice. And if you don't have Writhing Band of Trickery, or you don't like that, I would suggest you go with a ring like this. So a Loop of Surprise. So when you evade or shadow step, you leave behind a cluster of exploding stun grenades that stun things. And that's going to be important because on the boots here, I'm going to go back to talk about this. We do use Shared Misery. Now, you could use Ghost Walkers. Ghost Walkers is a really good legendary aspect that I enjoy, but in content that could be troublesome or dealing pretty good damage that may kill us, may clap us, Shared Misery helps knock things down and persist the knockdown. If we stun something, things around it may get stunned frequently. And that kind of plays in tandem with Surprise, right? When you drop stun grenades because you evade, you're stunning things like on site and then things maybe around it. You have this echoing effect of crowd control, which is great because we want things to be crowd controlled all the time. Crowd control things in this build are going to get dealt a lot more damage than things that are not. You want things to be crowd controlled, okay? Like slowed from your puncture, stunned from your shadow step, knocked down from your trap, dazed from your twisting blades, all that stuff, right? You want to have that. So Loop of Surprise is another option for you there on the ring slot if you don't want to use Writhing Band of Trickery. And then again, the swap on X-Files. The other ring that I use, these are the sort of affixes I think you should go for. close crowd control, lucky hit, and maximum life. Life, make sure we're not dying, right? If our life hits 0, we're spending a lot of sigil powder to get back in there. So I prefer those affixes. I like close crowd control, lucky hit, and life for everybody. I'd recommend that. As for a necklace, so I don't have the ideal one just yet, but it might be something like this if you could get it. Total armor, movement speed, all imbuement skills, and then I'd like to get deadly venom if I could, but I'm going to try exploitive passive. So exploit's kind of nice because we deal a huge multiplicative of 36% with this amulet, and I'll show you that in a skill tree. 36% multi to things that are healthy or injured, which is about 55% of the total monster HP. Now in the middle is what we got to kind of slog through. But we're still going to deal great damage in the beginning and amazing damage at the end. But the middle, we just have to work our way through it a little bit. And that's why Deadly Venom may be a better choice for you. Deadly Venom, when maxed out in this build, you're going to get 9% multiplicative poison damage, and I'll show you that. But if it was 3 ranks, it'd go up to 18% multiplicative poison. That's a lot. So either one's okay there, and I think movement speed's great again because of the following. So let's go into the Vampiric Powers for a second, okay? So Vampiric Powers, I'm going with Prey on the Weak. Prey on the Weak gives us, this is actually additive damage, it's not multiplicative. So it's going to give us 16% additive damage to vulnerable enemies, which is like everything's vulnerable as long as it's affected by a vampiric curse. And the way we apply that vampiric curse is going to be through Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is really nice because our evade turns into bats, right? So as we're going through, we just evade, we're bats, right? And so we can start hitting things, we evade through. And remember, we have 4 charges on our boots of evade with that vampiric metamorphosis power. When you have Tibault on, every time you evade, you become unstoppable. So you're always increasing that multiplicative damage pool whenever you want. You're in complete control of that. I love that a lot. So we're using Prey on the Weak to give us 16% additive damage, not a huge deal. We're making things vulnerable as long as they have the vampiric curse, which Metamorphosis puts on there. We're also going to use Ravenous. So Ravenous says you have a 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed for 6 seconds. And this build can hit the cap of 200% pretty easily just by hitting a couple targets. We're going to stay alive and robust through Undying. Casting skills, it should say every time you use a skill, right? Using a skill heals you for 3% of your life or 6% if we're below 50% of our HP. So just casting, just sitting here hitting would heal me for 3%. If I was below 50% HP, it would heal me for 6%. That's a lot. That's like, that right there is taking care of Siphoning Strikes for us, so we don't have to use it. But if we were going to take Siphoning Strikes, you may want to replace Undying with Resilience. It's a really good choice. Resilience here says you gain 1% damage reduction for each 2% life you're missing. That is a very, very tanky, very solid vampiric choice as well instead of Undying. If you decide to go with Siphoning Strikes in the skill tree, which I'll show you, but I don't. And then finally, Flowing Veins. So the way that works with Flowing Veins is we're going to deal 60% increased multiplicative damage with damage over time to things that are affected by the vampiric curse. So as long as we travel through like that and he has that skull, any target that has that skull, they've got the curse. All of our poison is going to hit huge. 60% multi now. All that stuff. Now, I'd also recommend something here in the gameplay settings. For the Abattoir of Zir, because I don't want to die, I'm turning my damage numbers actually off. And to do that, you press Escape, Options, Gameplay, and right here, Combat Text Display Mode. No thanks. I don't need to see a bunch of numbers when I got to make sure I don't die. I'm going to have it very clean. So you can have it display all or hide all, or just hide damage numbers. If you hide that, you're still going to see things that are vulnerable. You're going to see things that are dazed, all that jazz. So I'm going to hide it all. Yeah, I'm sure. And I recommend you do the same. So that's gear. That's Vampiric Powers. That's what I would choose. You could change this out if you don't like Metamorphosis. I think you have an option here. Let me see. You could go a Curse Touch. So it's more of a generic, I hit you, the Vampiric Curse kind of spreads around and everybody has it anyway. That's nice and all, but I do want to have control over when I'm unstoppable. And sometimes I get stunned and I'm kind of like dummied a bit, and I never want that feeling. I don't want to die to some random thing. I want to be in control of my unstoppable situation. And so because of that, I'm going to recommend people go Metamorphosis, but either one's fine. It's really up to you in the way you want to use it. I prefer that. So let's check out our skills for a second, okay? So from the top, let's start off with basic, right? From the top, we're using Puncture. Puncture is a marksman skill, and that's going to be important at the very end. We need a marksman and a cutthroat skill. So Puncture, 1 point into enhanced puncture, and 1 point into fundamental puncture. So what this is going to give us is every single time that 2 blades hit a target, it's going to become vulnerable for 2 seconds. But as long as something has that vampiric curse, it's vulnerable indefinitely. So we have multiple ways to make you vulnerable. The other thing here, throwing blades a short distance deals damage. Every third cast, every third throw will slow the target by 20% for 2 seconds. That's how you make things slow in this build, okay? Then in our core skill, we're maxing with Twisting Blades. No surprise, we're a Poison Twisting Blades rogue. We're then going to put 1 point into Enhanced Twisting Blades, and 1 point into Improved Twisting Blades. Enemies are dazed while impaled with Twisting Blades. So we hit them with Twisting Blades, they're dazed. And with our Shared Misery boots, that could go ahead and persist to other targets around them. And Daze is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, crowd control effect in the game. A dazed target can't act. It can't do anything. It's just dumb. It just stands there and doesn't know what's going on until it dies. So Daze is huge. We're then going to put 3 points into Sturdy because we're going to gain 12% damage reduction, period, right? 12% close damage reduction. Thanks. We're not putting any points into Siphoning Strikes because Undying gave us that already. Moving down, we're going to put 1 point into Shadow Step, 1 point into Enhanced Shadow Step, and then finally 1 point into a Methodical Shadow Step. So when I Shadow Step to something, it's stunned, and with my Shared Misery boots, things around it could also be stunned. Crowd controlled, CC'd, big damage for us. I do max out Rugged. I want damage over time, 27% damage over time, damage reduction for free. I don't know that there's not going to be this really nasty dot that things can apply to me in the AOZ, so I'm going to kind of be prepared against that. I want that already. That just makes me feel safe, tanky, that kind of thing. I'm also going to put 1 point into Reactive Defense. Assuming the worst situation is I'm surrounded by targets, I'm under the effects of crowd control, I want a little bit more damage reduction, and 6% a nice damage reduction for free. So I put 1 point there. I like that choice a lot. It feels good. I then put 1 point into Rapid Gambits. So whenever we evade, our evade cooldown is reduced by 0.5 seconds whenever we daze an enemy. We're dazing an enemy all the time with Twisting Blades. We're constantly hitting, we're constantly dazing. So our evade comes up, our Unstoppable becomes more available. And I love that gameplay. It's really, really good. In particular for Tibault. If we know now that the boss is going to show up with some more vampiric badasses beside them, we're just going to go ahead and start dazing all these clowns and then get our evade up, so we're constantly doing that multiplicative damage with Tibaults. And then 1 point to Trick Attacks. When you critically strike a dazed enemy, they're knocked down. So knockdown, daze is cool because that could persist with Shared Misery. Knockdown then gets persisted as well. Let's continue. Inside of our Subterfuge skill, we're going Poison Trap. So Poison Trap, 1 point to enhance Poison Trap, 1 point to countering Poison Trap. You could do more damage, 10% more multiplicative damage with subverting Poison Trap, but I find that having Poison Imbuement up more frequently is just the way to go to deal great damage on this build. I'd recommend countering. Now, Exploit, we max that out. You'd get 18% if you have the necklace that I've got, giving you +3 in Exploit. You now see it's 36% multiplicative damage to Healthy and Injured. And Healthy is characters that have more than 80% of their life, and Injured is targets that have less than 35%. Okay? Looks good. Also, Agile. Anytime we use a cooldown, we increase our dodge chance by 12%. So what has a cooldown? Dash has a cooldown. Shadow Step has a cooldown. Poison Trap has a cooldown. Poison Imbuement has a cooldown. Anytime we use that, we get 12% more dodge, and dodge gives us more damage. We love that. Moving down into our imbuement skills, we max out Poison Imbuement. This is a tremendous DPS increase for the build. Definitely go here. Enhance Poison Imbuement, and then we're going to put 1 point into Blended Poison Imbuement. Critical strikes with Poison Imbued skills deal 75% multiplicative poison damage. That's a bunch. I've been trying Mixed Poison. Mixed Poison feels good, but ultimately I'm going to recommend people against large HP targets to go with Blended Poison, and we should be okay there. We're then going to max out Deadly Venom to give us 9% more multiplicative poison damage, and Debilitating Toxins to say, hey, if you got grease on you, if you got poison on you, you're going to deal 15% less overall. That's huge. That's huge for what we're going up into, which is potentially high HP and maybe a little bit more damaging minions and monsters and bosses. Finally, back in the ultimate skills, max out Innervation to make sure you always have energy when you're casting those Twisting Blades to daze. You're going to max out Alchemist Fortune. Non-physical damage you deal has a 15% increased lucky hit chance. So I like this too, because that could be Poison Trap, right? Poison Imbued, Pestilent points on a ring, and then ultimately, like anything that's that's also Doombringer, right? Gives us increased lucky hit chance. So speaking on this for a second, we have one more to go over. Second Wind, every 100 energy we spend grants you 15% increased lucky hit chance for 5 seconds. So with all of these minor nodes selected, I've got some notes here. Our Writhing Band of Trickery with our base lucky hit chance with the build so far would be 35.4% lucky hit. And if we had X-Files Corroded Signet on, we would be at 42.6% lucky hit chance. That's a lot, because we could also toss another 20% on through an Elixir. So that's fantastic. That amount of lucky hit, we should always be feeling X-Files procs. We should constantly be seeing sort of benefits on our character. That just feels great. We're also going to put 1 point into Adrenaline Rush because we have to move into Haste. So while at or above 50% maximum energy, we get more movement speed, which is more attack speed. And then while below 50% max energy, we get plus 15% increased attack speed anyway. So that's great. And then finally, close quarter combat. So damaging something with a marksman or cutthroat skill is going to grant us 10% increased attack speed bonus for 8 seconds for each one that we do. So puncture, 10%. Twisting Blades, 10%. That's 20. When you put that together, we're also going to enjoy 40% bonus of our crowd control, which is currently 164% for the build. Multiplicative damage. Nasty. Absolutely love it. That's what we want to do. And that's the skill tree that I'm going to recommend. Now, let's dig into the Paragon board, okay? From the top. So we're going to be taking Prime. It gives us damage and life, which is just a no-brainer. We want that. We're also going to be taking Resilience. This gives us resistance to all elements and maximum life. Getting life nodes in this build is very important because that's how we get that high HP pool, right? And this is sort of the build. So we go down into here, and then I'm going to recommend we take Tracker. Tracker is going to give you 77.2% damage to poison enemies, and our poison effects last 33% multiplicative, 33% longer than they usually would. So that damage that we deal is just rotting these guys longer. We don't got to work so hard to apply it. I love that a lot. You're also going to get Skillful. You're also going to get Lawless. This is going to give you a bunch of armor, 200 armor plus 10 dex. Just fantastic. And this too, increased damage and 10 dex. Love it. The next board we're going to move into is going to be the Cheap Shot board. And Cheap Shot, we're taking this. So you're going to deal 5% increased multiplicative damage for each nearby enemy that's CC'd up to 25%. So as it gets really bad and like the density of the room is coming in to kill us, we're getting more and more damage to deal with that problem. It's just reactive play. It's a reactive choice. I didn't take this in other builds and I should have. It's very, very good. So inside the Cheap Shot board, we're going to take Versatility. So Versatility is nice because it says non-basic and non-core skills deal 15% increased multiplicative damage. Fantastic. It also allows us to go up here and grab Wiles. So damage reduction from slowed enemies. Remember, slowed enemies are coming in from puncture. We're going to be throwing that basic skill, and as they're slow for 2 seconds, we're taking less damage if they're near us. Okay? We also get to enjoy Devious. So 30% damage to crowd-controlled enemies and additional dexterity for versatility. You don't want to put too much extra points in this because versatility doesn't seem to scale up as a glyph. It's just not great. We're also going to be taking Oppress. So we're taking Oppress and we're taking Calculated. So Oppress says damage to crowd control enemies and critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. This is tremendous. Everything is going to be CC'd all the time. It's important that it's CC'd because this is where a lot of our damage comes from. Crowd controlled targets. Oppress does that for us, as does Calculated, okay? And then moving over here to the left, we're going to be choosing the Tricks of Trade board. So board 1, starter board, board 2, Cheap Shot, board 3, Tricks of the Trade. But we don't take Tricks of the Trade because it doesn't work with poison, so we don't care about that. Inside Tricks of the Trade, we're going to choose the Bane glyph, right? So Bane is huge. It's just fantastic. Poison damage. But listen to what this does, right? Poison damage effects have a 10% chance to deal double the amount of damage over their duration, which is extended by Tracker. So those two play very well together. So we're taking Bane here. We're going to move into actually Focused to deal more damage to elites and give us additional dexterity, which is dodge and damage. So Focused, absolutely sick. Definitely pick that up. We're going to move up into Lawless, which is more dexterity, more armor. That's how we get the armor value up. Moving on to the right here, Brawler. We'll deal more damage to close, and we take less damage from close things, which is ideally what we want, right? If we're in the conversation of combat up close and personal, having a nice time, we want them dealing less damage all the time. And then we're going to move over here to the left just to pick up Shadow Resilience. Now, you don't have to grab this node if you have capped Shadow Resilience resistance. I didn't. This is where I kind of shore that up. I also get more HP, maximum life nodes for doing that choice. So that's big for us. And we are capped at 70%. Let me have a look-see here. I'll show that to you guys here. This build is capped out at perfect resistances, okay? Let's go back into the Paragon board. Pardon me. So we continue on from the Tricks of Trade board up to the top into the No Witnesses board. And in the No Witnesses board, we're going to enjoy Training, which gives us maximum life. We're also going to get Knowledge, which gives us damage and intelligence, which ultimately is more resistance. So that's fantastic. And the glyph here is going to be Efficacy. Efficacy kind of says imbuement skills have a 20% increased multiplicative potency. That's just huge. Like, that's just huge. We'll take that glyph there. Absolutely makes sense. We also get to enjoy some bonus damage and life from this selection. So after we've made all this choice from the Cheap Shot board, so 1, 2, 3 is going to be Tricks of the Trade. 4 is going to be No Witnesses. The 5th board you're going to choose is going to be the Leyrana's Instinct board. And over here, Poison Resilience. Now, I'm not capped up. I don't need to be capped up on Poison Resilience. If I had it, that's cool, but we're not even close to hitting this, so we don't care. This is going to cap us off, and we also get more life nodes, which is great. We're also going to take Nimble. I really like the ability to attack faster because one of our weapons is Doombringer. It is a little bit slower. You will feel it. If you play with 2 daggers and then you play with swords, you'll feel the difference like right away. I promise you that. So I like Nimble to increase the damage. It works with Undying. It works with killing. It just give us that attack speed. And it also plays into the pathing quite nice to Leyrana's. So we're getting Poison Resilience. We're also getting Nimble. And we also get to enjoy Feint. So Feint is nice because we get to do increased damage after dodging an attack. And I don't have the bonus here, and that's totally fine. If you can hit it, fantastic with all stats. Get high ranges on that. you're looking good. And on this board, we're going to use control. We get 145.5% increased damage to crowd control. Again, you keep hearing crowd control, this is why, right? And then we're going to deal 20% increased multiplicative damage if things are stunned. And we could stun them with Shadow Step. We could stun them with, I think it's actually just Shadow Step with a stun. Daze can convert into a knockdown, but not really a stun past that. So as long as they're stunned, no problem. If they're slowed, they're taking 10%. If they're stunned, they're taking 20. So we'll take that as a free bonus. And again, that's control. And then finally, we move into the Eldritch Bounty board, number 6. Eldritch Bounty says when you attack with an imbued skill, you get 3% maximum resistance and 20% multiplicative damage, which is poison for 9 seconds. So an additional multiplicative damage bucket for all of us to enjoy. And then finally, we come down here to grab Restorative. Restorative is nice because we get potion healing, which is probably going to be nice when things like are hitting a little bit harder. But we also get maximum life, which is what we want. So we grab those minor nodes as well. Okay. And that's our current Paragon board for this build at the moment. So we've gone through the skills. We've gone through the vampiric selection. We've gone through the gear and like sort of what the choices could be. And then I guess it comes into, one big thing we want to talk about in the gear here. So corruption on our two-hander is insane. Your imbuement skill effects have 80% multiplicative potency against vulnerable enemies. Because of that requirement, and thank God Lucky and I talked and had that streamer collab, it's very important that everything's going to be vulnerable, right? And that's why we're using Prey on the Weak instead of a previous choice before. We want to make sure everything that's affected by a vampiric curse is vulnerable because we want things to be vulnerable to enjoy this 80% multiplicative potency application. Without that, we're just giving that up for free, and we really shouldn't be doing that. And I'm glad that we're no longer doing that. We're making a bit of a more fine-tuned adjustment for challenging content to erode it before 10 minutes starts, right? Now, let's go into, and I'll show you the next Paragon board. Let's assume that this was correct, and it got us into the Abattoir of Zir, like, fucking fantastic. And now we're going to Abattoir of Zir, level 1. We killed it. We got the glyph, Tears of Blood. Let's check this out. Okay, and let's just verify here. We're on DiabloBuilds.com, and we are looking at our Tears of Blood glyph. Let me see what it says here. So, okay, so this here in, okay, we're all good. It's clean. Let me get this out of here. I don't need to worry about the alerts at the moment. That's okay. So from the top, we're still doing the same thing. We're still taking Tracker. I looked at Devious, and when I compared Tracker and Devious, Devious came up short with the damage, but it gave us about 150% more, 150 more armor with a 10% multiplicative damage bucket that I don't know that we need just yet. I still want to really push poison. I want to do good offensive choices here, and this is how I'm going with it. So all of the descriptions, the description of this video will contain these links, so don't worry about that. I got you. So this is the path for the starting board. We're still going to take Prime. We're still going to take Resilience. We're going to get Tracker in starting board with Lawless and Skillful. And then we move into the Cheap Shot board. And you'll see here, this is where it all sort of changes, right? There's no more board to the right. We're now sacrificing a lot of our additional damage because we have to give it into the Tears of Blood. And at level 49, you're going to receive 754.7% increased multiplicative damage, which is freaking crazy, man. That DPS is nuts. Our effective DPS is going to be 102,317,000. That's the cool thing about Diablo builds. It shows you what your DPS is going to be. 100.2 million DPS. Like, can't wait to do it. We're also going to enjoy Wiles because things are going to be slowed. And Wiles at this level, 49, will give us 11.9% damage reduction from slowed. It's also going to give us, let's go ahead and check this out, Devious, 29.7% damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Like, it just scales really well. So again, we're going into the Cheap Shot board after the starting board. Then we move over to the left. It doesn't change all that much, right? We're trying to remain the same. Okay, we had a bit of a selection issue. There we go. So Tricks of the Trade boards is the next one. We're still going in with Bane. That's not going to change too much. We still get to enjoy Focused. We still get to enjoy Lawless. And then we move up. We still have Brawler. That's all good. So Tricks of the Trade board into board number 4, which is going to be No Witnesses. And in the No Witnesses board, Efficacy. Efficacy, absolutely. We're still going to get Knowledge, right? We're still going to grab Training. And then we move off over to the right, which is going to be Leyrana's Instinct. Looks the exact same. We're not going to change that too much. We're still getting Control. We're still going to be picking up Poison Resilience. We're still going to be getting Nimble. All that's still the same, right? And then we get Feint, which we still have, right? We still have Feint. That's cool. And then we move off over into here into Eldritch Bounty. And Eldritch Bounty in this board, we get to enjoy, yeah? So we have Eldritch Bounty again. So this is what the new Glyph board looks like with Tears of Blood up to level 49. And I'll show you how the board changes in the next tab here, which is going to be a level 200 Glyph, which then brings you to 4,373.8% increased multiplicative damage, which brings you up to 1.3 billion DPS. 1.3 billion DPS. If that's not good enough to beat this content, that would surprise the shit out of me. I can't even imagine how much HP they'd need to survive that. Because we could bring in other friends, right? We could bring in big barbs to do the same thing. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy damage. So what does the board look like again? Just some more, we got to make some more sacrifices, right? We're no longer into Eldritch Bounty. We're no longer getting that multiplicative damage. But at 1.3 billion DPS, I don't know that we're going to need it. We have to then choose more basic nodes here, right? We have to choose more basic nodes to fuel the Tears of Blood. But when we make this choice, we make a subtle little addition over here. We actually go, and we're not taking this one node here. I'm not taking reduced damage from, we're not reducing slowed damage anymore. We don't care about that. We're going to actually move up into the Spearhead rare node, which gives us more damage to healthy targets. Remember, healthy is things that have 80% or higher HP. So we really start to crunch these guys when they have a big HP value. I want you to start thinking the way that I'm thinking. If you don't mind, like, let's see if it works. It's like percentage damage. If you got a lot of HP, I want to crunch that number down fast. And Spearhead helps us get there. Because if they are healthy, we're going to hit them really, really hard, right? And especially our necklace kind of plays into that a bit. Exploit, but not as much as I would have loved, but it helps. That's why I want Deadly Venom to be your choice. It doesn't care where your HP is. It's just going to be tons of poison damage. But we are going to rely on Spearhead to deal even more damage to targets, which is great. We are going to have Safeguard. We still get that. We still get Oppress. We still get Calculated. Then we move off. We also get Devious. We also get Wiles. And when fully capped out, Wiles is at 20.9% damage reduction. You also get Devious, giving you 52.4% more damage to crowd control, which is exciting. The gear doesn't change. The skill tree doesn't change. It's just about Paragon manipulation to maximize it, okay? Again, this is cheap shot. The next board's going to be Tricks of the Trade. We didn't change anything up in Tricks of the Trade. We move over into the No Witness board. That's still very much the same. And then we move into Leyrana's Instinct. We no longer have the attack speed. So we do give up the attack speed for damage. I would give up the 5% increased attack speed. I do. I give that up. Excuse me, hover menu, right? I give that up to appreciate 4,300% damage. Like, I'm going to do that every time, right? We also get Faint still. And that's kind of where we go. So that's what I'm looking forward. That's what I'm looking forward to. So December 5th, when the AOZ opens up, that's what I'm going to be doing. Here's the gameplay that I want you to do, right? If you don't mind. Use the first build that we showed you in the video today. Use that build. That's your board. The moment you get that glyph, this is what I want you to do in the game if you can. Come here. So, you did AOZ. Knuckles to you. Congratulations, you're a champ, right? I want you to press A. I want you to go to your Paragon board and click Refund All. Open up the tab. Click on the first link that'll say Paragon Pre-50 and just start copy pasta, man. Copy pasta. In the meantime, get that sigil powder up. Get that sigil powder up and make sure your glyphs are all 21. Every glyph I'm showing you here, they're all 21. I'm going into AOZ assuming I have some really strong player power for me and you want to do that. Glyphs, again, all the glyphs that we're using, we'll go over it. We're going to be using Bane. We're going to be using Control. We're going to be using Efficacy. We're going to use Tracker. We're going to use Versatility. We're also, yeah, that's it. That's all we're going to use. I have other ones leveled up because I run a lot of stuff, and these are the ones that I think are going to be the absolute best to get the job done. And I'm curious to see what you think in the comments below. Feel free to let rip and let me know. If you're doing something different, that's cool, that's fine, that's clean. Just remember, it's modular. It's modular. If you don't need the dash, if you don't need it, you can always just press S and get, like, even more, like 49% damage reduction. Press that, you get your taunt off for free, and bam, you got all kinds of damage reduction. It's insane. Or what do you want? You want to go camouflage? You want to go concealment so they can't even hit you? Go ahead. You have choices in this build because that's the benefit that Shaco gives you. If you don't have a Shaco, I'm going to talk about this just at the very end, sort of like a summary here. If you don't have a Shaco, another helmet you could use would be Andariel's. I want to see if I have this here somewhere that I can show you. So there's a combination that works kind of nice, and I'll show it to you right now. It's Andariel's and Temerity. So it's kind of weird, to be honest, but because you're not using the Tibaults, the Tibbies. You're not using Tibby cheese, but if I throw on Andariel's, right, and then I throw on Temerity, I actually get a pretty solid barrier on my HP, right? But I don't get dash anymore because I didn't put the points into it. So let me show you what happens. I've got 28,000 HP with this setup, okay? And with Andariel's on, right? You have the Temerity buff going on. Andariel's is constantly leeching, right? We're constantly leeching with Andariel's. And as we go, we have a barrier of 18,000. 18,440 on top of 28,000 life. Something's got to hit you pretty good to get that down. And you're consistently doing that. So there is gameplay there for Temerity. And I'd probably use I would get rid of, I would actually, if you're going to go this way, if you're going with the Andariel's Temerity setup, I'd probably recommend you go with Shara's instead of Condemnation, because you could probably get away with Inner Sight too. Like, watch how fast we level this thing up, right? If we go that way. We dash through, we hit, right? And that's it. Like, that right there just feels fantastic, right? All that clean damage. 18,000, like, really, really rapidly. And it doesn't stop. It, like, doesn't ever really end. So, again, I'd probably go this way. You have choices with this, but if you don't have Shaco, you can definitely use Andy's. I've been messing around with that. It feels good, plays well. If you do have all the options that I've shown you and I've outlined everything, I'm telling you go with Tibault's on swap for big DPS with X-Vals on swap if you want to. And if you need even more damage on a big HP target and you know you got the HP to deal with it, so we're saying like a level 24 AOZ boss where we got to do tons of damage, we're struggle bussing it, you can definitely go like this for maximum DPS. You could toss on Tibault's, you could toss on X-Vals to replace Writhing Band, you could toss on Ashara's Kanjar to replace your Doombringer and let rip. And you just sit there and you go ham on whatever that is, right? You get your combo points on and you just let rip. You do your thing. And that poison's going to roll up real nice, okay? Roll up real nice. Now, it just flies through the game right now. It destroys the bosses, no problem. I carry people on players 4 in anything that we do, whether it's Echo of Lilith, Tier 100s, Duriel. The game doesn't have any content this build can't dominate at the moment, and that's why I'm comfortably telling you that when the gates of AOZ are available, I'm not using a lock-in key. I'm going to use my foot, put it right through the door, and carry this nasty assassin straight into Sanctuary's AOZ and beyond. Much love to all you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I told you it's going to be a bit long form, but I hope I answered a lot of questions that you may have out there and gave you some comfort that the Rogue class can get there, have fun, and look good doing it. I want to thank you all for checking out the video. Leave me some comments in the description if you like the video. Give it that thumbs up or not. It's up to you. I sincerely appreciate you all. Thanks for letting me do this gig, and I'll see you all in the AOZ. Adios.